Wonderful, Andrew. So let me put on my podcast persona. I can feel it like flowing
Yeah,
into
yeah.
my body. I can see like your persona forming a little bit and like your cheeks and your eyes and like who is this man? Your haircut looks, I think, even a little more dashing than the last time I saw you. And you have a nice
Yeah.
facial hair vibe too. Like, are you a pretty meticulous person, would you say, in general, or is it just
Oh
like
no, I wouldn't say that at all. I say
oh,
I'm quite an open person, but I'm more like one of these kind of chaotic creative types that does everything in 10 different directions. Um, my partner Tom at Parallax, he's the conscientious one. He's the editor. I'm an editor too, but I'm more chaotic and exploratory
what does
by
chaotic
nature.
mean? That's a word no one uses. Like, how is that manifest in yourself?
Well, I just mean that I go in many directions. I don't go in one direction. I don't do one thing after the other. I'm very lateral. And I tend to think on, many levels at the same time. So it's sometimes hard for me to be consistent on one level. So I struggle with that. I need a lot of discipline I need a lot of discipline to deal with this kind of mind that I have or that I've cultivated.
Oh, I like that. I like that you're kind of saying I have it and I've cultivated it and it's got a life of its own. I like that this part of your
All
personality.
those things. Yeah.
Yeah, it feels that way. That's excellent. And is that what draws you to like Layman and John and people like that? Is their complexity and their tolerance for ambiguity and their like capacity to generate like really crisp, clean insights about reality that can go like, oh, that's what reality is. It's not this ambiguous thought space that I'm in all the time. Or is that
Yeah, I
ridiculous?
think so. I think, I tend to hang out with a lot of philosophers. And I don't know if that's true about myself, but I don't think of myself as a philosopher by nature, even though I hang out with a lot of philosophers. I was a musician for many years, so I tend to deal in gestalt rather than detail. And I tend to think metaphorically, imagistically, sonically, even because I'm also a magician, more than I tend to think in terms of arguments. So although I'm making an argument right now, so maybe all of these philosophers that I've hung out with, maybe they're rubbing off on me in some kind of a way.
Interesting, yeah, because philosophy, it's weird that it gets associated with arguments. And like John Vervaeke one time called Henry Thoreau a poet. And I was a little offended by that because I was like, no, he's a philosopher. He was thinking so uniquely in his cultural moment. And that's
Hmm.
what philosophers do. I mean, artists, I guess, do that too. But to me, an artist that's a bad artist is not philosophical. And an artist that is an artist is philosophical. So the argument distinction, and you saying like, most of the time, even though this is an argument, I'm not an arguer and I'm not a linear, discursive, detail-oriented thinker is fascinating to me.
Yeah,
What is
well,
focus to you? Or go ahead,
I
yeah.
think it's like I think an artist works more with compression, and a philosopher works more with elaboration. Although, again, when you say these kind of things, they're not absolutes. The artist, as you say, who has no philosophical, is not informed by philosophy, tends to be, solipsistic, or where and the philosopher who tends to have no art tends to just be autistic and just be conceptual, right? So I think I think the two are, should always be in conversation, just like the left and the right brain should always be, connected in some way. But as McGilchrist says, I love the right brain. I think of the left brain as a servant, but the right brain is the space of ambience and atmosphere and beauty and resonance. And I guess if since we're talking about film today, that there's a relation to that, because film, tends to be less uh, propositional, but no less philosophical, probably, if you look at a good film.
Yeah, that was excellent. I love that you're still being poetic in your description of things and weaving together like, hey, we're here to talk about movies. And I agree because I think like a philosopher with no imagination is like a musician or dancer that never practices, that like vehemently never wants to learn skill. It's like, why are you doing that? You could be better if you could incorporate, especially a philosophy of beauty, like you were saying. Like it's a philosopher that doesn't appreciate other people's creations, to me, is almost like not a philosopher. Because when I was learning, as I continue to learn about philosophy, I think it's like so important to dialogue both with like yourself and with others and with history. And if you're not dialoguing with art, um, I don't know, that's weird to me. Like even if it's always critical, that would almost be better than just not valuing art as a philosopher. And the same thing, like artists get away with that though, because artists can be moody. Like actually, it's almost like an artist's longing to be moody and then express that moodiness. And I use the word moody
Hmm.
but very, very flexibly, like just to have like more pathos and empathy and messiness within their psyche than like a Rene Descartes, who like, I don't know, did you ever read the Meditations?
No, I've never wanted to stick pens in my eyeballs.
Well, yeah, it's painful. Like you even intuitively are correct because like if he would be a little more poetic about some of his themes rather than trying to be discursive and prove everything like to the letter, it would be such a better book because he gets into that poetic part of his soul, but then just can't express it through
Yeah.
prose. It's kind of
It's
sad.
also just it's a question of what you're good at too, because I know that some of my philosopher friends can hammer at a concept for eternity and go really elaborate into that, and I don't maybe have the patience or something for that. And I also have maybe it's a question of I have a more like romantic nature. I think I like to drown in the Dionysian more than clarify, clarify, clarify. Right? Like I know that some people are just obsessed with clarification, and this has to be clear, and I'm like, no, it has to be mysterious. Also that's I guess my interest in mysticism, and religion as well, which requires a lot of empirical thinking and a lot of clarity as well if it's good mysticism. But at the same time, there's people who want to create an entire system of something and live within that system. And for me, I think I want to unravel the system and live within the mystery.
Yeah, yeah. The system part of philosophy I find troublesome, and the idea that like I was at a event, I won't get too particular about it, a couple days ago, and they wanted to systematize everything. It was about emotions, feelings, expression, and then they kept using this word system, and it was like dehumanizing the poetic part of like what I like about the soul. And I was like, oh, cool, we're here to feel better, but we're doing it through a very mechanical, sterile conceptual lens, and
Yeah,
it's a bummer when philosophy and art and mysticism and everyday life can't connect to each other. I feel like when they
yeah,
are connecting, that's really good. When you bring your thoughts into your everyday life, and your everyday life into your art, and your art into your ideas, and they're all just kind of cross
yeah,
pollinating each other. I think that's a lot of what McGilchrist talks about is like this need to reconnect to the brain and reconnect to the regions rather than just have one dominating all the time. And
yeah.
yeah,
And
and
McGilchrist was defending romanticism on some level, and sometimes I feel like doing that when I'm with philosophers like John. John's one. He's got a critique of romanticism, which is correct, you know. But yeah, I'm talking about temperament, or more than I'm talking about how I think people should be.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I don't
definitely.
think I think philosophers should be philosophers, and other types should be accountants should be accountants,
No,
and
definitely stay in your lane
poets
is
should be
important.
poets.
Comedians should not be politicians, and politicians should not be philosophers. And an artist
Yeah,
maybe should just be artist and not worry too much about other spheres. And I like that. The stay in your lane philosophy is like lacking from this world. People want to. I saw this was so sad. I was watching this YouTube video that was a comment on a comment on a comment by a movie critic on someone who writes about dating. And I'm like, you're wrong. Why are you wasting your talent on trying to philosophize about this person's deep thoughts with your shallow appreciation of what they're telling people just because you're charismatic about movies and have an audience that will tolerate your banal opinions or whatever. So
yeah,
the
Well, I mean,
Yeah, it's
on the other
cool.
hand, I want to say on the other hand, I
Mhm.
really enjoy hearing artists talk about their art, you know.
Well, that's
Um,
opening. Yeah. Do
I
you know
really
how to do
like
exactly?
Van Gogh talking about his paintings, and I think often we go to the academics where we should go more directly to the artists and listen to them more because there's often more thought involved than we think. We think it's some kind of weird mutation that they're able to express, whereas there's a lot of work behind that. I was listening to Nick Cave in an interview recently, and
Who's that?
somebody asked him, this a romantic artist, right, with this Dionysian dark
Cool.
expressiveness and chaos and stuff, and somebody asked him, like, what's your creative process? He says, I go to the office at 9 o'clock. I have lunch at 12:30, and I finish at 5:30. If I don't do that, I can't do it.
The structure is important. When I was learning to
Structure is
write,
very important.
a lot
Yeah.
of writing in graduate school, they would say like write every day, and I did that. And then like when you do something every day, it again it takes on a life of its own. I don't know if you've ever worked out a lot and then like taken a week off. A lot of people like I people say like I miss the gym because it really like once you have that routine going, then you can let that be a routine and play in the work rather than have to keep forcing yourself to do it all the
Yeah.
time and being like your own slave master to get things done. And even like a thing I started doing last year that I heard another artist do was they would play the same song while they wrote for the whole novel. And I started
Mhm.
doing that when I was editing YouTube videos, and it made it kind of fun, or writing, or doing little projects that would take more than one kind of episode to finish, or take a long block of time. And it was kind of fun because I'd go like, okay, I'm going to play this like really melodic operatic female vocalist while I do this, or I'm going to play something kind of heavy and dark or something playful. And then it just kind of, the rhythm of the music became like this nice background that was always there creatively inspiring me and keeping me on task even. And
Mm.
it created this like second little bubble of like, oh, when I'm doing this video, I'm listening to this song over and over again. And I'm the kind of person that like if I'm in love with something, I just want to like be around it. And so I can listen to the same song like 30 times if it's a good song. And so it's fun to have a little creative process that like
Yeah. It's about
allows
creating an
you.
environment. Yeah.
Right, right. I was going to say, like, it allows
I
you
mean,
to.
my friend Daniel Gardner from OG Rose, he talks about when he writes, he puts on a shirt and a different kind of jacket,
Well,
and
that's right. 'Cause-
he does it at a particular time every day. He create, this is his writing shirt, which is different than his out in the garden shirt, which is different. He has a shirt for each occasion.
that's super
That's
artistic.
it's
Yeah.
it's stepping into a ritual role and making it a ritual, and working on it as a habit. Cultivating habits. This is everything, right? Because if you don't cultivate virtuous habits, eventually the monster in you takes over, and you're really stuck in a repetitive unconscious loop for a long time
Yeah.
unless
The
you can
artist deals with the
create
monster very
this habit to
differently.
break through that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, no, no. The artist deals with the monster very differently than the philosopher, because the philosopher transcends the monster through logic and that kind of stuff. But the artist is always dealing with the unconscious monster with all that stuff and the monster of mood and those kind of things. And yeah, how you like I had a really, really, really creative friend who published a lot of poetry and played awesome bass guitar and like four different bands and did all these cool things. And like, oh my gosh, the artistic monster debilitated that soul like no one else. Like he would have all these thoughts and all these meanings that he would press onto reality that he wouldn't want to go to the grocery store and have to like persuade him how fun it would be just to go for a walk and buy like some popcorn together or whatever. Because he would have all this meaning that he was, no, what's happening when we're going to the grocery store? It's almost like Fight Club. It's like, no, the corporate slaves are tricking us and taking 80
Mhm.
cents worth of popcorn and turning it into $4 worth of their greed. And so it was this whole artistic thing was happening with him in reality all the time. And
Yeah.
then sometimes like these riffs would come out and sometimes these poems would come out. And he was afraid to like stop dancing with the monster because he thought he'd lose his creativity. So it's so
Well, that's
interesting,
why the
the ritual of
per-atterness,
it.
as the Peter Pan type always self destructs eventually because he can't get into ordinary life. I don't know. You read this book? I don't know if
Yeah.
you read the book by Maria Louis von France about Goethe, the poet, and she talked about how in his early work he was sort of mother obsessed romantic, not
Yeah.
willing to get into the adult world. And then what made him a very great artist was that he got this job as an administrator in the government and had this very dull day job, and that grounded him so that he could keep that part of himself, but not get lost in this you know, just oceanic, moody world that the artists often they get lost in their own egos, right? Often they create an ego, and in that they
Ego
don't they don't
boundaries
have a
too,
higher
like
purpose
ego
for what they're
boundaries.
doing. They're just trying to
Yeah.
express art for art's sake, and I think that could become a problem with this kind of romantic image of the artist that people have as the outside, the adolescent, you know outsider type.
Because we're in this period that's very like similar to the after the French Revolution, where being like really young and full of vitality is more popular than it should be. Like you can
Mhm.
be 50 and like full of youth and people will still respect that. Whereas in other periods of time, that would be mocked as like you're a child, like you're Peter Pan. But like it's very easy to just be Peter Pan till you die in American culture, I would say. And this, yeah, you're right. The grounding of responsibility. I don't know if you've ever read The Secret of the Golden Flower.
I've heard of that, but I know.
Yeah, it's a famous Taoist text that the
All right.
Jungians got their hands on. It's the reason I brought it up is because like very early in the text they talk about the importance of doing your duty and never forgetting that. It's very easy for an artist to want to retire from their duty and be like a whimsical, self-indulgent ego. But if you always do your duty and are an artist and can kind of keep in touch with both, then you're going to be grounded because you're going to like force yourself to be humble. You're going to keep your word more often. I don't know. There's something about artists that they love to
Exactly.
like change their mind. I don't know if that ever happens to you, but like I know people that like the freedom to change your mind is something that like artists indulge in way too much. It's like no, be consistent, be a human being, and then create art from that humanity. Don't just be this chaotic mess that never is a soul or whatever. Yeah, like Sorrow of Young
Mhm.
Werther's is very much like this indulgent, and it struck gold, right? It was like the right kind of indulgence that character was like emblematic of a kind of person that people aspired to at that time. But it's
Mhm.
like it's a hollow world. It's like you need to connect to things and start like a collective life to enter into your humanity at some point. If I'm not being a little too
Mm.
philosophical and poetic.
No, absolutely. Yeah. Well, maybe I was wondering about this course and your motivation and why we're doing this course.
Yeah, this is great.
Parallax
So
Movie
so
Club, Summer of Imagination, and what are movies? And we've been talking about the artist, and we've chosen a bunch of movies related to various directors, and we all have our different choices. So maybe you want to talk about that a little bit.
yeah, so we're here promoting this course that you and I and Laban Pascal and John Vervaeke are doing,
Yeah.
and it was born of an idea of just like maybe a couple of different things. One thing is just like it's fun and important to feel fun and joy, like to just do imaginative things. And so
Mm.
the idea of like all these courses that are happening, not unlike I don't think the 60s and the 70s, where there's this whole new age kind of movement, and all these people were starting these cult-esque little things, and you could go dive into that if you lived in California and become this like anarchist or artist or whatever. And we're
Yeah.
in that period, and it's amazing that like so many people that would have just been like university lecturers in London started opening up websites like Johannes Niederhauser and awakentomeaning.com and Parallax Media and 1,000 other things.
Yeah.
I've taken a bunch of courses like that, and now as a person desiring maybe like higher education or stimulation or whatever, I can take those things. And
Yeah.
so as I did a course last year with the Vervaeke Foundation, and watch people develop all of these like psychological aspects of themselves and like social interpersonal skills and things like that, I was like, oh, cool. This is real. This isn't just some narcissistic nonsense fad that the 21st century is vomiting up. It's a really cool thing that's happening, to be a little dramatic on purpose. And like, oh, I want to participate more in that. And so I also always loved the podcast you did with Alexander Bard and that you've done with John and Christopher and with other people that I'm forgetting to name right now. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. As I saw you in a flurry of emails on Alexander Bard's forum that I was recently invited to, I went like, oh, there's Andrew Sweeney. I've been hanging out with Layman all the time. We're both angry at Alexander Bard for the same thing. Why don't I reach out to him and we could start talking and things like that? And then we met and we started talking about alchemy and our friends and all these things. I was like, oh, this is perfect. This is going to be really
Yeah.
good. And then so out of that kind of relationship, I wanted to do this idea that I had been tossing around with Layman. And then I was like, oh, where does this go? And I'm like, oh, this is perfect because it's very much like the course that I think I did with Layman and Scout, where it's kind of like serious play more than just like philosophy and learning something about some great thing. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, how can four really smart, creative people share their passion about a film, and do it in like a dialogical way where there's other people talking or it'd be fun to participate in. And then especially as you told me the first time we talked that you were teaching a course on Fight Club, I'm like, oh, that's great because that's going
Yeah.
to be fresh in your mind. John and I talk about films once in a while, and John is always deep about the movies he loves, and so is Layman. So that's where this came from. I just go, oh, cool, let's do something that would generate awe and humor and joy, but also be philosophical and artistic and cultural. And if that's not too long.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and at Parallax, for a while, we've been circling around the idea of doing something related to film. There was a guy named Philip that had a film group in one of our previous incarnations. So yeah, I think it's important to think about iconic films on some way because they seem to have a prophetic quality to them. I'm going to be talking about Fight Club, and I was thinking about how it came out in 1990, right before September 11th, and I was thinking about how it prophesized so much about what is actually going on right now. And so that film, besides being sort of a dark, nihilistic but fun kind of romp, it's prophetic in some kind of a way, and it also shows the paradigm shift of the culture. I heard that Martin Scorsese walked out when he first saw Fight Club. Sort of the old, these are the new guys from the '90s playing with all this electronic music and digital media, and it's something new. And like, what the fuck is that? I remember that feeling when it came out. So movies tend to capture that. And it's interesting, like you mentioned the intellectual deep web, which is more like the intellectual fight club, because people there go at each other, philosophically, in good humor. Like we're all friends, but there's a fighting thing going on there, because guys like to fight with ideas and anyway, so I was just making the connection between the film I'm doing, the Fight Club, and the intellectual deep web, which you observe
Well, no, and yeah, like
some
just
of
to grab on that
the
thread.
philosophical fights that go on there, and how to do that with, and why is that happening? And it's an interesting, phenomenon.
Well, Layman as well is talking about violence in his film, and like Fight Club, especially male aggression more than even like human aggression. Like I think there's still a problem with that in our society. Kind of important person to me recently revealed that they had gotten in a fight recently. Like they were in a social environment and things got philosophical and angry, and they like reacted physically. And I'm like,
Yeah.
is that because we're all on Zoom all the time and no one's able to like throw a football and be angry without like the social commentary? Like that was very like unlike the person. And I was like, you think about I think about the unconscious a lot, and I think about society and pressures and personas and things like that. And Fight Club does that so well. It just grabs you and it takes you into these like dark thoughts of these people that are accountants and bicycle shop owners and baristas, and going like, there's a whole complexity happening here that you're not seeing when you're just tuning into the business world, which we
Yeah.
all do all day. We're like, oh, what happened on the market? What happened in the office? If my kids don't go to a Ivy League school, they're never going to succeed. Like, we're so obsessed with corporate success, and that, like, in that moment, like you said, the Dust Brothers techno music was jarring and weird. The lighting and the movement, there's like a lot of greens and purples and dark spaces, whereas in the 90s it was all like bright and happy endings, and like the protagonist always resolved their feelings in some positive way. And that movie is like so different. Even Brad Pitt's Seven, it reminds me of, like, if you really like start to look at the actors and the directors in your movie in
Mm.
particular, Edward Norton is like a deep, deep, deep thinker. And you can watch his other movies and think like, wow, this guy is really putting himself in these abstract situations and wondering how he'd react and then living that out in his roles. So like, it's so awesome to see great actors in great films become this like prophecy, so to speak, like you're saying, and they really do reveal social issues or things that are bubbling underneath that are unraveling in time. And John Vervaeke, when he talks about like zombies, I love that. I think that's perfect because like there really was like times in history where they start showing up like vampire movies and werewolf movies, and then they're all whimsical dances and like um movies even like that are kind of tropes like Robin Hood. I love watching them because they reveal the culture at the time as well as tell a fun story. So they're saying something really about America in the 90s as well as entertaining us when these iconic films like Fight Club uh, capture our imagination. And they're fun to like stare at together. It's fun to talk about good movies with
Yeah,
other smart people.
it's
I don't
true.
know if you did that a lot as a kid, but I remember just like dozens or hundreds of times going to like play D&D or going out to a movie with my friend or friends and then going to like a restaurant afterwards and just like angling the movie for an hour or two and going like, well, what about that? And what about that? And I don't think we do that enough sometimes, and just like share experiences and talk about them together because everyone is on their different frequencies. And, you know, you're into
Mhm.
10 different things that I'll never hear about because they're so nuanced, and I'm into things you're not into. But when we look at a great movie like last summer, Barbie and Oppenheimer, they became things that for weeks and months you could talk to about a stranger. And like the Fight Club movie is a perfect example of that, because everyone's seen it, everyone has thoughts about it, and then you can kind of just dialogue with your buddy
Yeah.
about that. So like, I guess
And then
I
there's the
wonder.
movie like the John picked, The Fall, which is the exact opposite. It's a movie that is so incredibly beautiful and got totally missed by the culture, it would appear. Maybe it didn't, but I missed it, certainly. And it wasn't like front and center, whereas maybe it should have been. But it's very interesting how maybe sometimes movies come back around that were not that were not seen the first time.
Yeah, finding gems and really appreciating them is hard to do. That's why I love having friends that are into movies because they'll share movies that I've never heard of that just you don't read about in, like, let's say I go to Rotten Tomatoes and look for like some new cool film to watch that's 20 years old or 15 years old. It's hard to just find one sometimes. But if like
Hmm.
Layman recommends something to me and he does it in an exciting way, I might rewatch it. Like he was telling me about Dracula, and then we both got excited while we were talking about it. Then we rewatched it and podcasted about it. We're like, oh, this is so amazing. This 1990s movie with all these awesome
Mm.
people is really, really alive today and is really
Ah,
like
yeah.
touching on lust and horror and Christianity and consumerism and all these themes that are like just as real. And it's got Keanu Reeves and all these, you know, stellar people. So yeah, the power of film to ignite the soul and to connect people and get them excited about things and reveal the levels of culture. Um, yeah, that's just to kind of keep answering the question you asked. Like that's why I'm excited about these kind of courses. Is you know what did you say to me when you saw the Kurosawa film? Like what was your reaction when you saw that for the first time?
Well, it's so beautiful to watch because it's a totally different style of acting. You know, we live in a global culture now, and I guess when that came out in the 50s, Japan was still Japan, fully Japan, even though, even after the war. And it still had its own particular idiosyncrasies and style and way of acting. So the acting is completely not cliche in the way that you're used to seeing. And just the body movements and the whole thing was,
Mhm.
there's a very theatrical aspect to it, and it was very epic, but also it had more appreciation for the foolishness, and empathy for our human foolishness, like the two fools in it. I thought it was like it was a window to the past. Somehow you could see the past in that movie, but the past entering into the future because it's filmed. It's very, things before film were not filmed. Right? They never
Isn't that
existed.
exciting that we're in that time, like a kind of a generation after film was invented, and we're still in the throes of like, I love watching old movies from the 10s and 20s and 30s, and like they're figuring out how to shoot and how to cut things together and how to make something fun and watchable. And you watch like those silent films where they're roller skating and crashing into walls, or there's like a train going and you see the conductor get scared and they're trying to figure out like what is it to create a poem in visual like
Mm,
space with music that we can edit in and things like that. And the camera to me is like the book. It really is the 19th century and the 20th century and the 21st century is like we're literally able to watch wars now. Like that's ridiculous. Like I've in the last month watched drone footage of people dying in foreign countries because of the camera. And then on the better end of that, yeah, you get pulled into Japan and it's amazing. I was rewatching that earlier, and even the names in Japanese are these beautiful characters. And you go, wow, I wish my name was like Treehouse, Flower Blossom, Brushstroke. It's like, oh, I'm in a different world right now. And the bumbling fools that are inspired R2D2 and C3PO. That movie, literally, Steven Spielberg saw it and then created Star Wars. And those two characters in the beginning that are like, we smell of corpses. You made me smell of corpses, as they tried to like racketeer a war and rip off an army. Now they're bumbling around looking for a new way to rip off society. And that's how the movie starts. And it's like, wait, I thought this was about samurais. What are these two bumbling fools doing, wishing they had gold? And then you're pulled into like pre-technological Japan in a way that like there's a formality happening between the characters, and then even just the cadence of the scenes unfold very differently than say like a western made in 1958 or an action movie in the US in 58. So yeah, the way that a foreign film can pull you into the culture, or even an old film can pull you back into the time, is something that is hard to do. It's really
yeah.
amazing that that's
And
possible.
I was thinking about how it's good to watch films consciously because so often today people are streaming Netflix and consuming media in a compulsive, addictive manner. And if we do that, we lose the art of contemplation of a good film. So going back
Yeah.
to movies, because like everyone else, I watched Game of Thrones, and for entertainment. When you're tired at the end of the day, you want to watch the thing that is like the cultural thing of the moment, the cultural movie of the moment, and you lose the sense of history, you lose the sense of deep contemplation. And so what I've been doing with my daughter, who's 14, is every Friday night we've been trying to watch a classic movie, right? So we watched 2001 Space Odyssey
Nice.
with Kubrick, and I hadn't seen that since I was a teenager.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
of course, it's like seeing it for the first time, and it's one of the great movies. So
Well,
it's
that's why great movies are so great. Yeah, is because my new criteria for a lot of movies is like, would I watch it twice? Which is almost the opposite of the consumerist model. The consumerist
yes,
model is give me a new 10 star right now. Is every day I want to be, or like tune out and it's all thoughtless. And yeah, I love all four of the movies that we picked. I think are movies I could watch 5 times in the next 10 years, and I would not be angry or feel like I wasted my time. Like the Greeks would do that. They would revisit their tales, and it was normal to watch Fight Club once a month, so to speak, or to watch The Fall yearly, so to speak, because they were great dramas. And if you brought your children to them or you hadn't seen them in a while, they remind you of layers of human condition, or they reminded you of the poetry that's possible in life and things like that.
Yeah, and just the fun aspect. In my course, I was showing students Rocky Horror Picture Show, and I don't know if they really got it because we used to go to that, all the time. Like, in the punk rock in the '80s, you'd just go to that movie over and over again, and bring your toilet paper and bring your rice, and
Right, that was a thing here too. Yeah.
it was a wild event
Yeah.
that everyone know, and there would be such an intense ritual aspect to it, and you would also quite literally communicate with the actors on the screen, yell out things, shout out things. That was quite a movie, and it's a movie of utter absurdity, right, and utter
Well,
fun.
cult classics are
There's
great. Yeah,
nothing
because
there that is needs to be talked about philosophically particularly. You could obviously
no, no,
be
no. In
philosophical about everything,
1986, I
but this
remember.
fun aspect, this absurd, wild, outrageous, kitschy fun, which was written about by Susan Sontag in her famous essay Camp, is this is underrated, especially in this Protestant serious culture of we're worried about the meaning crisis, and
This
we're
is
all
what
going
I'm
to die.
saying, Andrew. We're on the same page right now because
Okay.
absolutely people are not celebrating joy and happiness and foolishness and superfluity. That's one of my favorite words right now. It's just like I want to do things not for the most economic, efficient, practical reason, but like if I see like a flower, I just want to smash it in my face and smell it because that needs to happen, not because of some rational discourse that I had where the 15 pros and the 7 cons were laid out and my whole society agreed with the decision. Like we need to be a little ridiculous. And Rocky Horror was perfect because I remember I had friends, they would meet up in their cars that they would name their car. Like my friend had a car he named Betty and all these things. And they would dress up and they would
Yeah.
like some of like the freaks at my school would wear chains and they would have their friends like carry them around on chains and drag them around and they would get so excited. And I'm like a very like social butterfly. And I would be like, oh, that's cool, but I'm busy. I think I went to like 1 or 2 of them. But I had friends that would go like 20 times over the course of like a year and every weekend or a couple times a month. And they got so excited and they came back so happy. Like sometimes they would come back at like 1 in the morning or 2 a.m. to like our friend's house where I was hanging out. And they'd be like, it was so awesome. And this tired, like participation and joy, you could just feel it in their body, how
Yeah.
happy they were. And yeah, we've
Totally.
lost that. People don't do that anymore. And we're all
And I
so
remember, I mean, the happiness, got a little absurd at certain points. Like after the show, we were marauding the streets, and we got on a bus and we destroyed the bus. Like we just tore the bus to pieces, really Fight Club style. This is punk rock,
right. I
era.
loved when Kurt Cobain started smashing guitars on stage. Like
Yeah,
people have pieces of his guitars today that are worth money. And it was like, why is he doing that? He doesn't need to do that. I mean, you can hear producers saying that to some of the time. And Dave Grohl is like, no, we're smashing the guitar right now. It's what we want to do today. And they did it. And it was like, that's sometimes you have to break things to express yourself. And sometimes you don't want to just do that all the time. But if you never do it, you become like a Tyler Durden who just hates himself and his life and wishes for like a real life. And
hmm
yeah,
hmm
I loved that stuff. I mean, I even feel like a little bit like definitely Alexander Bard et al. And Parallax and John, like you guys kind of are countercultures and are, I don't know if you think of yourself that way, but like I remember when I was working with David at Rebel Wisdom, someone said like, oh, we're talking about countercultures. I know a lot about that. And immediately it was like, aha, we're not talking about America or the 21st century, but we are talking about, Fight Club fans or Rocky Horror, nonsense, just to kind of label it a little bit. And that's important. Like that's how the soul lives in desperate times or whatever. Like if you're in an insane
exactly.
society, which I try not to be too cynical, in my broad thoughts or whatever. But if you
Hmm.
are, it's not good to fit in. It really is not. It's better to be a weirdo way, way off in the periphery with some other weirdos than like trying to fit into a very degenerate, um, unhealthy time, which I don't think it's hard to argue that.
Yeah, yeah, and who who wants to fit into something that is
Yeah.
utterly banal and
That's what
degenerate.
I like about Bard's Forum is that it's a home for everybody. And I love because I don't know how well you know Rachel Hayden and some of the other people
Mhm.
that hang out there, but like Rachel and I have been reading books together for a long time with other people. And she would always tell me about how fun their forum was. And I was like, great, that's so cool. And then seeing it, I was like, oh, this is the uh,
Intellectual
weirdness.
Fight Club.
Yeah, this is what they were talking about, and
Yeah.
I'm very agreeable. I'm very respectful, and so I had to really get out of my element and make like a persona to participate there. But it was fun. It was like being Rob on that forum was a weird experience. It was definitely not like Rob at his grandmother's house or Rob at like talking with John and Layman about the meaning crisis or whatever. It was. I like that because you need a place for those kind of people. Have you ever been on Greg Enriquez's Utah forum space?
Yeah, I was there once. I think for one of his conferences, and yeah,
Yeah, so the people
I've
that
interviewed Greg,
attracted
of
to
course, a
him,
few times. Yeah.
yeah, it's the same thing. It's like the people attracted to him, they need that kind of world, and being in that little
Mm,
world gives them a home, and I'm happy for them. You know, it's like
yeah.
it's so cool to see these little homes for people where they can express deeper parts of themselves, express some of their frustrations and their joys, some of their very, very weird ideas, because some of those turn into like the next Fight Club or whatever. And yeah, you don't have to participate in like mainstream culture. You can. This is a nice alternative to that. These kind of places. So I hope
Mm,
that like even
absolutely.
this movie club what connects people to each other. Like you were saying, you wanted to do this before, possibly, and I think it's cool. Like whoever will show up, they're gonna all want to talk about movies. Like there's a really important idea called self-selection in psychology, and a lot
Mm.
of people are self-selecting into their jobs, into their roles, into their lives, or whatever. And so the people that select into a movie by artists and movie club by artists and philosophers about four cool films, I'll bet a lot of the people that show up are pretty cool to hang out with from my perspective.
Yeah, well, this is what it's been amazing about our courses at Parallax, if I could even say that,
Yeah, yeah, please brag.
is it's been nothing but generative and nothing but a pleasure to hang out with these people because they want to be there and that's why they're there. They're not there for a degree. They're not there for any utilitarian purpose except to increase and expand their networks of knowledge and symbiotic intelligence. And so there's a pure motivation, right? It's not to get something. I mean, it could be,
No, 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 you're right. It could be, but
but
the
it's
center
just
of it
not to
is
get
not. It's
something.
not
It's just to be there. It's just to be there for that moment with those people.
exactly, and that's important to spend your Friday night with people you like, doing something you like, or spend your Tuesday evening with people you like, doing something you like. Like that's what life is. Life is our free time, and when we connect with people with similar aspirations, or yeah, or just over something we love. It's I mean, I was talking to someone about the liturgy, and they were saying like how fun it was to go with their friend to this Catholic church in England that was this big old church. And I was like, of course it is, because you're surrounded by people that are just like you. They're
Yeah.
all participating in something they all find beautiful. It's not the
Right.
people that hate Christianity that show up to the liturgy. It's the people that want to be there and find it
Right.
like illuminating. And
Well, it's
so,
interesting, like you
doing that,
mentioned the church, because Gurdjieff would say that the movie house was like a modern temple. And
go on. Yeah, say more about that.
well, he'd talk about these places as temples, like these entertainment houses, as some kind of religious temple. And
What
they're
would he say about like those nudie booths in New York City that are like the triple X version of this? Is that also a temple or is that
oh
separate?
well, maybe that would be the tantric temple. I don't know.
Nice, nice. Okay. I love the building as home to psyche. So this temple idea of like when I see a bar, I see a place for drunks to go be happy. Or when I see a movie theater, I see a
Hmm.
place for couples to go to dates or loners to be alone or whatever. And so, yeah, this idea of where are the temples? Because for some people, they are the actual temple, but
Yeah,
for a
for
lot
a
of people,
drunk,
they're
a bar is their temple, right? They go there to be with people like them and get drunk, and that's their temple. That's what they worship: the alcohol, the the goings on, and the
well,
you know,
and yeah, and it houses that culture. Like it really
yeah.
like it's cool that like you can walk down a street and see like 10 little homes for different cultures. The person that loves sweets, there's a bake shop for them. The person that loves their kids, there's a little like toy store for them. For the drunk, the drunkard to use old-timey language, there's the bar. For the existential artistic part of our soul, there's the movie theater and stuff.
Or the coffee house, or
And
the
and then like what is the internet? What is this digital space that we're in that is like the temple with no walls or something like that? Like
mm,
the when you really abstract it up to this new phenomenon that we have that's like a building that's in our pocket, that's distributed, that's not a building. But yeah, like
well,
what are
there's
we
walls.
doing?
I mean, in a sense, there's a wall of Zoom. It's like there's a door, there's an entryway
Yeah, but it's
to
so
different groups.
different
But
than like
the internet itself has no walls, but there's within the internet are virtual walls everywhere, right?
well, it's almost the ultimate like temple slash simulacrum, right? Because you can totally connect to people that you couldn't in person. We talked about this offline last time a little bit and go like, oh wow, I'm really into the logos or whatever. And there's a few books I've read about like logotherapy and Platonism and Neoplatonism. And
Mhm.
before I had to find like either a college course near me or like a Barnes and Noble or a bookstore that might have a little kind of book club or be alone and get lucky and talk a little deeply with some strangers once in a while about my passions. But now I can find a dozen Neoplatonists and talk about Plato every week if I want. And they're all really into it. It's as if they live near
Yeah.
me, but this internet is connecting us. And so it's the grandest connector and like everything that's too connected self implodes at some point. Like so it's also
Yeah.
the great destroyer.
It's the great destroyer as well. I was thinking that.
That's what I
Yeah.
was saying. Yeah, it's
It
both because
destroys souls. It brings people together. But it also, yeah, it also sort of,
well that's what we got to
again,
learn.
it's the
And not to
capture.
get
The
too much.
capture is so powerful. Um,
Well, it is. There was a Star Trek episode where Wesley Crusher, do you know the Next Generation Star Trek? Yeah,
I think I
Wesley
might have seen
Crusher.
that one.
He went away. I haven't even said it yet, but he went away and then he came back on the ship like 2 weeks after the whole ship had vacation. And the vacationing people brought back these little lenses that they put on their face and they played these games in these little virtual worlds and these glasses they wore. And he was like, I have to study for my midterms. And he didn't play the game. And then in a week, the game had infested their consciousness and they only wanted to play it as soon as they were done with their jobs and free. And he's like a nerd and he's like, why are all the adults into the device and not into me and everyone else? And he saw them all get sucked into this virtual world, and him and Data, who wasn't seduced by the nonsense, and like one other person confounded the whole plan and saved the crew within the last 5 minutes or whatever. But it's terrifying that if I'm in an awkward situation right now, instead of dealing with my awkward feelings and like reaching out to the person that's making me feel awkward and engaging with reality, I can just go into a feed or into a social world and just pretend reality isn't happening. Like it's
Mhm.
so easy to do. If you're introverted even a little, then it's just natural to do even. So I think it's doubly dangerous for
Yeah.
people that don't naturally want to like connect with people in person and go outside and accomplish goals that aren't digital and stuff like that. Yeah, that was a bit of a
Mhm.
rant, and I apologize, but
No, no, I mean, yeah, it relates to this captivating power of let's say moving pictures.
yeah, or even
Which
like radio, right? Isn't radio like in North Korea, they have these little boxes all over the place that broadcast radio all the
yeah.
time. And there's something weird, almost like you can make a Christian parallel about a voice ominously, loudly projecting authority into your reality. It's like you should like Tom Hanks, you should like the dictator, you should like this McDonald's cheeseburger or whatever. And we have these these devices just streaming in their desires into our day to day. Whereas 500 years ago, you could push that person out of your house and lock your door or whatever. Like they weren't just in your world all the time trying to
Yeah. Well,
survive.
radio is the sonic aspect of it, but
That's
it's
what I mean.
both,
Yeah,
right?
radio is was
You know,
profound.
Marshall McLuhan called it hot media, and hot media is media that just hypnotizes you, basically, captures your attention fully, and short circuits your thinking process and objectivity. You have none; it's gone. Whereas, if cooler media would be like a book,
Yeah, yeah,
because you have to do a lot of work to enter the realm of that book, and so there's an active quality. But so yeah,
yeah,
you have to balance this hot media and cool and or you call it cool and hot media. Yeah, you have to balance those two things. Or
yeah.
you just get fully captured, and then you are like the guy in the Fight Club. You are like, totally living in an IKEA furniture kind of existence,
Yeah,
or
commercialism failed.
virtual reality that's and then the frustration builds, and the frustration builds, and it just, the whole system has to implode.
Well, that's
Uh,
what's weird. This is a very platonic idea. Yeah, we shouldn't be such vicious consumerists towards each other. It's so crazy how we want to just market our ideas to each other's minds. And I've worked with young students that are like marketing majors and business majors, and I have an economics degree, and they want to trick people into buying things for the company they work for because they
mhm.
just feel like that's normal. That's what jobs do. Like I had a friend that worked at an orange juice company, and all they did at Tropicana was use chemistry and people that made six figures to make the orange juice taste more orange juicy like, and then like super salient, to use John's language, and seducing you into addictively buying orange juice every week and getting like pre-diabetic conditions, all these bad things because it's not even really like pulp and juice anymore. It's this chemically manufactured like orange juice like substance that you
Yeah.
are like drowned
The
in to
food is
buy.
virtual. Like a tomato's not a tomato anymore, and
Right,
an
like they're,
orange is
they're
not.
bred for
Yeah.
qualities that are like consumerist, not virtuous and good. And it's like
Yeah.
the compromise has tilted so far to that side, it seems like. That again, I love that these ideas of movie clubs, because getting to hear layman talk about films, getting to hear you talk about films, getting to hear hopefully me and John, who are not really as artistic as you two, talk about films is going to be fun because that's the imaginative side of things, and that connects us to our past and foreign cultures and the bigger ideas and slows us down to think about what really happened, and that it's fun. It really, that's why I like Kurosawa in particular. I was a little nervous about picking him, but you have to read the dialogue and you have to actually like not be texting and not be multitasking to really love that movie. And when you
Yeah.
put all that stuff down and just watch it, it's colorful and it's surprising and it's deep and it's got all of these kind of themes that humans from any culture can relate to. And then you leave it and you go, oh, that was something its own. That wasn't just like episode 172 of Seinfeld that is canned and feels like a repetition of something that used to be fresh. It really is something fresh, and yeah, being brought into
Yeah.
these
I
worlds
mean,
is so.
he worked until every word had gravity, didn't he? I mean, there's very little dialogue in Kurosawa's films, as far as I understand, compared to a lot of films. There's a lot of silence.
Well, in Asian,
But
like if
then
you just
each word
compare,
actually matters. Each word, actually, it's
well,
not
yeah,
just
and they
drivel
tell the story
and
with the
noise.
faces and with the groups of people and with the colors and with, if you notice Kurosawa, he's always using nature, almost the way like I have dreams sometimes, and they'll have natural elements, and I'll be like, oh, is that a mood that I'm not paying enough attention to, or what's happening with the
Mm.
natural element of my psyche? And there's always rain and wind and movement and cherry
Yeah.
blossoms and deserts and waterfalls and things like that. And it's like they don't need to be there. Like Marvel movies are all like in a space where they talk and a space where they break things in a space where they talk again or whatever, and they're just going back and forth. Doesn't even matter where they are. But in the movies like that, it's like, oh no, they're at the river, and the river
Yeah,
matters. They're at in the rain, and the rain really adds to the tension of the dialogue that's about to happen. Bruce
yeah,
Lee said no movie should be more than half dialogue, and I love that idea of
I
like things need to
agree.
be progressing and people need to be interacting and moving, not just discussing what the plot is doing or whatever.
Yeah, I was thinking about the difference between if I don't know, have you seen Thin Red Line?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's a war movie which includes nature. You know, you see the suffering of the animals.
They did that a
Uh,
lot more
uh,
before CGI, right? Yeah, there's these epic war movies where
Whereas the
these
epic war
people,
movies are all about people just killing each other, like a Spielberg movie. If I just
yeah, yeah.
finish, like a Spielberg movie is always humanocentric. All you see is the humans and the humans and the human psychology, and it's very, it is very comic book like, but you don't have a full tableau like you do in a in a Malick film. You have the sweeping tableau of human beings happening within nature, not human beings stomping over top of nature. So
No, I love that. Even in like martial arts, if you're like doing balancing stances, if you're too lopsided, you'll never balance. And so if you're all culture, no nature, you'll never balance. And
mhm.
Kurosawa does that like so elegantly. He's always trying to put these dramatic cultural moments within nature. And even in Ran, the movie Ran, have you ever seen that one?
Mm,
Like they're so solemn and they're so like the gods, and the gods exist like nature outside of the social world, and
yeah.
the smallness of the social world in comparison to the bigger elements or history or these sweeping things, yeah, that movies can remind you of, because it is a bummer a little bit that we are all a little bit cubicle workers, just kind of typing away our lives a lot of our time, and we miss that sweeping openness of the world. And I don't know, I like that romantic idea of the world is this big, giant, beautiful place, and the cosmos is alive and full of drama. And even though the scientists know a lot, we haven't figured everything out yet. And there's, it's almost like it would be not fun, but it would be fun if a meteor was headed towards Earth, because we'd immediately all care about it. We would go like, oh, we should divert the missiles going to Ukraine to this other thing, and we would just drop this petty nonsense that is 2024 most of the time and go like, oh my gosh, can you believe we're in a spiral galaxy with a billion-year-old, ball of gas spewing out elements, and that vastness of life that is so much more important to the soul than like what happens in a business meeting or how much money you made yesterday or last year or where your kids got into college or whatever these things are that just consume our consciousness collectively. So,
Mhm.
yeah, is there anything else you want to plug for the movie? I feel like we've danced around in a
Oh, that
lot of
was
stuff.
nice. No, that was a nice final sort of. I don't know what it was. It was almost like a sermon. It felt like a bit, but that was nice. Yeah,
I love the logos, and
the
I,
logos.
I
Yeah, I
spent
mean,
too
I
much
don't mean
time
that
with John.
in an insulting or negative sense. I think this speaking aesthetically is important, and I
Yeah,
guess that's
yeah.
what it is. It for me, I guess film, you know, if it is done right, and it's not always done. Well, there's always imperfections, even in the best films, but it's ecstatic in some kind of a way. That's how I would summarize it.
Yeah,
And
yeah. The
so
aesthetic.
hopefully the course will be ecstatic for people. Hopefully they can come and experience ecstasy with us at the Parallax Movie Club 24 Summer of Imagination.
If even one person experiences ecstasy, I think the course succeeded. And
Yeah, and
so I,
ecstasy doesn't mean like a big orgasm. It means it's a more subtle thing. You know,
well, both. I want both. I think
it's both. Yeah, it's
we should
both. Yeah,
aspire for one big orgasm and mostly a lot of little
and
subtle things.
many little orgasms.
But you're right though, because ecstasy is important. It's as important as like practicality, let's say, and the idea of again kind of coming together, watching movies with people, and um, just being happy and delighted and surprised and all of those things. Like
Yeah, and
it,
fully engaged in the moment. and fully there, fully present, fully, with all the senses. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, that's the other part. Yeah, let's just end on that because the sensual element of films is a big part of what separates it from reading a really good essay or reading a really good book. Is the more even black and white movies, but like the color and the drama and the everyone is sexier than who you'll see the rest of your day. Like, you ever go to like a store and go like, these people look hideous. These magazines and movies are
Yeah,
lying to me. Like, like you get to see this like sexier, cooler world unfold, and that sensuousness, it does bleed back into us. Like, there's something about encountering something beautiful and exotic and creative and aesthetic that even if it's way better than you, like Rocco would say about like these ancient statues, like even if it humbles you in this beautiful way. And yeah, you are really, I think, participating in like the soul of the director and the actors a little bit when you have a good movie that you love. Is that fair to say?
absolutely. Yeah.
Well, excellent, Andrew.
Yeah, come and hang out with us. It's going to be great.
Exactly. And Layman Pascal and John Vervaeke are just amazing, warm, intelligent people who are almost guaranteed to not say the most obvious thing about movies and bring in that next level of that philosophical aspect